Hi everyone. Welcome. We are doing our Decentralized launch event today. I am joined by two of my fellow young producers and Comuzi Labs. So we're going to start with introductions first. So I'm Kaylee D'Souza. I'm one of the young producers at Somerset House, and I'll lead it on to the next person.
I'm John McNish, and I'm also a young producer at Somerset House.
I am Ryan. I'm also a young producer at Somerset House as well.
Hi, I'm Safi. I'm a designer at Comuzi.
Hi everyone. I'm Alex, co-founder at Comuzi, and yeah, happy to be here. So, what are we talking about today? What we here for? How we starting this? How we starting this? Maybe I can start. What brings us all here to this conversation? I'm actually trying to remember. I'm probably gonna say this so badly, but Comuzi, we moved to Somerset House in 2019. I think it was 2019, the good times, the times when we were allowed out. And I think at that time, Somerset House were planning to do some sort of they had a theme for 2020, which was about the historical importance or significance of Somerset House as in terms of once being a place where when you were born, your birth was recorded there, and when you die, you were recorded there. Was marriages recorded there? I think so. I can't remember as well. And there was this whole, conversation about could we create some sort of digital artifact, some sort of artwork that maybe speaks to this historical context of Somerset House in some way. What happened was the whole idea initially was could we work with young people? We had this idea of 6 young people, between I think the age groups of 18 to 30, and we were can we basically have this concept of them being an artist collective, design studio. You give them a brief and you take them through this process of how Comuzi works, and then at the end of it would have this artifact, and then we would go away and build that. So that was this initial vision of somehow trying to collaborate with the Somerset House Young Producers Program. And I don't know, has that been introduced? Does anybody want to explain what the Young Producer Program is? Because I don't want to run away for 5 minutes.
So, okay, I'll go. So basically the Young Producers Program, it was a program that was launched back in October 2020. It's basically a program to help people through engagement and skills. And it's basically to help young people like us, who are underrepresented through their professional development, and give them opportunities and point them in the right direction through creating things through, I don't know, artistic approaches. I don't know if that's the right way to explain it, but yeah, that's just my version of what I think the program is. Yeah.
And so the whole plan was to partner up with this. This would be the first initial project. It will be this really impactful project, and I'm not sure at the time if we had a Black history focus. I don't know.
I don't think
we did.
I think maybe we did. Maybe it was because I remember that whole idea was we went to a historian took us on a trip to look at the history of Somerset House, and then we discovered there's actually an absence of Black history, so there's actually no Black history. Then I think that's when we kind of oh yeah, there's actually no Black history. We need to start searching out for the Black history. So yeah. I think it was always there, but I think it was kind of I think it became more evident after we did the tour.
There was this desire on how we can sort of have a conversation or begin to have conversations about Somerset House's history in regards to Black British history. Black British history tends to be quite maybe the way how I was raised in school is that Black people came through the Windrush in after World War II, and that's when the journey of Black people started. Maybe there was a couple sprinkles of Black people here and there. That's what Black history used to teach them every in primary school and that. And I actually have the brief here. So the brief was actually, how might we create an interactive web experience that explores Black British heritage and the history of Somerset House? I was actually on my second screen trying to like constantly try to find where these slide decks were, but that's where I found it. So that was the brief we had. And over the last couple months, this is the journey we've been going on, is how do we create this interactive web experience that explores Black British history and the history of Somerset House. So my question to you all is, Genevieve, talk to me about how you came across this project. Like what intrigued you to want to apply for it? What did you know at the time?
Well, like you said, I think more towards 2020, it highlighted stuff about Black history and how can we raise awareness for it. So I really thought that within my creative practice outside of the project, I just graduated uni, and my project was about Black British history and looking at how we can change the single story, like you said, that Black people didn't just arrive here after the Windrush period in the late 1940s. So for me, I wanted to look at ways that I could further enhance this or further educate people about the story about Black people in Britain, because Black British history is something that is obviously like not really well known of. So that's what intrigued me. And also the digital aspect, because within my practice, I do a lot of stuff by hand. So I wanted to, especially with COVID, how places and museums aren't really accessible, I wanted to look at a way where we can reach as like a wide audience and just essentially educate people about Black cultural appreciation and Black British history. That was my inspiration.
Cool, thank you so much for that. Ryan, how are you? Loving the blonde hairstyle. Loving the blonde hairstyle. How are you?
Actually not blonde. See, that's the thing. I feel like you guys may be colorblind, or maybe it's like your computers. Maybe your computers are dusty, but it's actually blue.
Bring the hair. Bring it to the camera. Bring the hair to the camera. What color is that?
It's actually green, blue.
Yeah.
Oh, it's green.
It looks lovely.
Okay.
Like
Very Pisces.
Yeah. Call me Cisco. So what was the question?
Oh, so the question is like, what brought you, like, what made you like come to this? Like, what kind of led you down this journey of why you're here now, applying for this? Yeah.
Okay. Well, I feel like for me, having two marginalized identities, being both Black and being both queer, I feel like there's not really like any representation. I feel like only now it's starting to come to the forefront, and I feel like I wanted to be part of this project because I wanted to be part of something that not only kind of like restores Black history to institutions like this that have no existence of Black history, but also to kind of like how can I say this? Kind of like include the community in, like my community in, like Somerset House and institutions like that. Because I feel like coming to like Somerset House institutions, like I feel like you don't. I don't know. For me, you can't really. I don't know, for me anyway, personally for me, I don't know if I'm speaking for everyone else, but I feel like when you think of Somerset House, you don't really think of like, you know, Black people and like going into the Somerset House, or I don't know, sometimes there can be that disconnect. So I feel like I wanted to kind of like merge that in, but and create projects and stuff like that. So that's what inspired me to kind of like do this project. Maybe I said something different in my application. Hopefully I didn't. I probably did the same thing. But yeah.
I forgot about that. There was an application process as well. So there was just to mention for those who watch this video, there was an application process. I think there was over 200 people who applied, and 6 was chosen. 6 lovely, amazing people was chosen. I believe that the application process was a blind application process, so I don't think people knew people's names who was applying. And I think it was their words, their passion, the things they said that lovely to see 3 of the lovely 6 here. Kaylee, what caused you or brought you here to sort of apply and be here? Yeah.
I would say from my own experience, I feel like 2020 was a massive cultural shift for Black people across the world because of the situations and trauma we witnessed. So for me, it was just a case of, I guess, seeing how impactful the creative sphere was during this time. There was a lot of campaigns going on, a lot of movements going on, born from what happened, obviously, in the summer of 2020. And seeing that this opportunity came up, it definitely aligned with where I wanted to start shifting, because obviously my creative practice is an illustrator, but even after all of the things that happened, I started illustrating more political or racial sorts of illustrations to highlight the inequality. So when I did see that Somerset House were coming out with this incentive, it just seemed like the next correct step to go in, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's for me.
Cool. So talk to us, like, this is, so the project kicked off in October and now we are basically in February. And so I've seen you lovely faces virtually for a long period of time. But like, what happened? Like, so what did we do in October? What was the first thing we did? What was the process? Who wants to go? Talk away. Add. Yeah, what was the process? I'm interested.
And how did you feel as well before you started? Like that first day when we all met, what was going through your mind? I want to know that.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. That's so funny. So the first day, I was actually quite intrigued. I was just like very open-minded. It was very overwhelming because there was so much happening on that day. But so obviously the historian, I thought it was quite interesting. Listening, like her learning about the history about Somerset House and like the backstory and stuff like that. And I thought it was quite funny because like when I was on the tour, I was kind of like connecting the dots of like how I could bring it back into Black history. But and then afterwards, after the tour, we met everyone. We met the staff. That was quite overwhelming. Everyone was just driving in and talking to us, and we forgot like it was the first time out like of COVID. So like it was the first time out of quarantine. So like that's why they were like talking to us like so much. Like it was quite overwhelming, but it was quite fun. And then after that, we had a Zoom discussion with Alima Gray to kind of like give us context about how we can merge, how we can suss out things that we didn't know that didn't come up about Black history, and like the links to colonialism, basically, and like see how we can link that and bring it into the project. And then I'm trying to think what happened after that, and then we got sent home. Does anyone want to like follow up? Because I feel like I'm missing something.
You got sent home. Sending home feels so.
Okay. Like wrap up the day to kind of like think and digest, and then we had the meeting afterwards to talk about we had a Zoom meeting afterwards to talk about. Oh my god, I remember a lot. We had a Zoom meeting afterwards to talk about what we learned and like how we can apply what we've learned. And then I think that's when we had our areas of focus, right? We have a point of focuses. Oh my god, I'm doing really well. We had a point of focuses. And then with our point of focuses afterwards, then we each individually chose what we wanted to look into. And then we would create a presentation afterwards about it. I don't know how long the presentation will be, but that was amazing. Like everyone's presentation was amazing.
So does Janavi, do you want to talk about the presentations? Because I remember that we had the framing, then you had this stage where you had to explore, everybody went away and did the research. So what do you remember what you explored in your presentation, and you want to share how that was for you?
Yeah, so we had on the Zoom meeting, we all spoke about our different areas of interest, and at the time, I don't think it was specific to Somerset House. I think it was just in general to do with Black British history. So we all spoke about different things that we are all interested in. That was really good. I like that because it's very refreshing and inspiring to be surrounded by people who are like-minded or people who have similar aspirations, especially when it comes to things that are so important, like educating people about Black British history. So for me and my one, I was really interested in music. So I was interested in Black British music and the legacies of it. So what I did was we had to make Pinterest boards as well. So what I did from my Pinterest board, I gathered lots of different imagery to do with Black British music and history and how the two link together. So I started speaking, my presentation involved looking at the different genres of British music and then looking at the different subcultures. And we also spoke about how Black British history and how different genres came around from Black people not being able to have access to different spaces, for example, pirate radio. So Black people couldn't actually get a lot of their stuff on the radio, so they created their own. So that kind of led into the idea about Black people creating their own spaces and the importance of that for Black people to be able to express, for cultural expression, and also the importance of documenting all of this so that future generations can actually see the legacies of Black history and that we can actually learn from it. So my presentation kind of went by the bullet points that we spoke to with Alima Gray, who was the historian Ryan mentioned. So while she spoke about how we can use history to emancipate and how we are our own liberators, that really inspired me, because it really made me think about archiving and how we can actually use history and contemporary experiences as well, because we also forget that we are part of Black history now. So all of our contemporary experiences right now are valid. So it really made me want to document all these different experiences. So, but that, yeah, the focus for that was music. So that was my one.
Cool, thank you. Kelly, what about you? Do you remember your presentation or what you was exploring?
I do. So my presentation was called Perseverance and Preservation, Exploring Our Culture. And with my PowerPoint, it was basically off of the back of the tour that we had, because contextually it was a very, it was framed under a very white lens. So with my PowerPoint, I was essentially looking at how with institutions like Somerset House, they've managed to successfully preserve their own culture and their own artifacts, and in general, anything to do with that sort of stuff. Whereas with Black culture, a lot of our artifacts, a lot of our cultural history has been really eliminated or fractured or taken away. So with my PowerPoint, I was basically looking at those parallels, at how we've managed to continue to persevere through that regardless, and also looking at the way that what's it called? I was basically looking at how in certain African countries they preserve their artwork in very, very different ways to European countries, where you have the whole glass box, untouchable, preserved forever, that sort of thing, and it kind of makes it feel more like a trophy than an actual piece of art and culture. Whereas in some African countries, I think it was Kenya, where they believe you can just make art and let it be destroyed, because that's the sort of process it should be. It should just be creating art for the sake of making it, not to forever preserve it. So yeah, that's basically that was the premise of my PowerPoint, looking at the parallels between the two and maybe incorporating the more African way of just making art for the sake of making it, having that energy in our own project as well.
Cool. And so we had that lovely presentation where 6 of you all presented different angles. We even remember having a catchy talking about like what materials was used to build Somerset House. I can't remember the stone. I don't know if Nkechi said marble. Maybe she did say marble. I have no idea. But she went into the detail to where the stone that was made for Somerset House was done. And the presentation, would you say, Safi, was obviously on point, isn't it? It was decent. What do you think? What do you think, Safi?
That's the thing. Like, I was so like wowed and blown away by all of your contributions, because each of you brought a completely different like understanding to like what Black history meant to you, you know, and you could see how it related to each of your practices. So it was like really hyper specific to like what you cared about. But I remember I wanted like Ryan to talk about what he learned about the different calendars.
That was good. Yes, that was so interesting.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember that. So basically what I did is, so I remember like, I think it was like, I can't remember where it was. I think it was near I can't remember what it was called. I think it was near where they used to put the dead bodies, where they used to put like the bones or something of like in Somerset House. And then the historian mentioned like the I think it's the Gregorian calendar. And then I was like, okay, cool, let me look into that. So now I looked into it. And then I found out that there's actually like that the Gregorian calendar is actually a Roman Catholic calendar. And so then afterwards I was looking into different calendars, and I found out there's the Igbo calendar. And I think in the Igbo calendar, I think there's like 4 days. There's 4 days in a week, and then there's 70 days. I think it's 70 days in a month, I think, because they do it by market days. And then I had this crazy theory about like how like this country is on like a Roman Catholic calendar, and that because before it was on a different calendar, like is it just another way of like control and like religion? It was just like a whole conspiracy theory that I had in my head. I wish I followed it up more, but yeah, that was just an idea because it kind of made me think like what calendars was our ancestors on like before, because we don't even know, and that's why I kind of had this theory like was the time. Is that the reason why time is forgotten? Is that why the reason why things are messed up and dates are messed up? Because like we're on a different calendar. Because no one really questions like what calendar was it actually on back then? Because no one knows. Because we're actually adjusting it to like the time. I don't know if like they have historians or they're looking at, you know, they're matching up from the different time. But for England to say, oh, this happened in like I don't know 1966, that could have been different in like you know in like Africa. So that's just like a question that's running around my head. Yeah,
that's a very fair point. Right? I actually forgot about the calendars, you know. Oh nah, I missed them times, man. Those were some good. That was a good. So okay, cool. So we you know we touched on those presentations after the research, and then we actually managed to meet up socially distantly in person. You know, that's the beauty of Somerset House. Obviously, having tons of space. I did want to do that in person because I felt like, you know, 6 of you had not met each other before. And and one of the things that I kind of miss is those nice bonding moments that people have together. Like where you're like, let's go walk to Tesco, let's go do this, let's go do that. You know, you're not even talking about the project, you're just talking about random stuff, and you just bond better. And so I thought, I can't do ideation online. Not for this project, man. Not for this project. Ideation online has been stale, bruv. So we need to do it in person. So take it away. Talk to me about.
But the ideation, for me, it was really good because I had never done that before. Because I had just finished uni, and the last project that we do is independent. Well, it's optional, but it's independent. So for me, working with other people on ideas was kind of really refreshing, because what we had to do was write down an idea each, and then it was kind of like we had about 5 minutes. We would switch onto each table and we could add on to the other person's idea. So it was really good to see the ways that other people would think about stuff, and you would look at stuff that you hadn't even considered. So it was really good, especially as you only just met the person, you kind of see how their brain works, and in that way we kind of got to see the different qualities that we had. So some people were quite practical and other people thought about things in different ways. So that was yeah, and on top of that we had a really good playlist in the background. I think it was Alex's playlist. Yeah, I love that.
Trying to steal from it.
Yeah.
Had my Shazam.
No, ideation was great. I actually loved it. I think that was like one of the best parts, like because it was great to like bond with each other, but also to bounce off ideas. Like I remember I think it was like musical chairs, and we kept on like writing, adding on to each other's ideas. That bit was great to me, because it was great to like, you know, see how everyone thought, but also kind of like create crazy ideas. And it was also entertaining watching people like attempt to, you know, read my handwriting. So that was quite entertaining.
Wow.
Oh, girl. More flashbacks.
You adapted so quickly though, because I feel like in a lot of school systems we're used to just writing down our ideas in paragraphs and having it all neatly done on the page. But you were okay with breaking out to drawing stuff and like just fleshing it out in different ways. So yeah, good luck you guys, because
I think that's why I wanted it to be in person as well. Safi, was because it was like 6 creative people. I was like, fam, this is probably going to be one of the best ideation workshop I'm ever going to attend. I need to be there. I need to see this in the flesh. I need to be a part of it. And I'm obviously very proud of what everybody did and, you know, sustained. And, you know, I wish we had more moments together in person. That's always like the sad thing about this project. I don't know, Kaylee, do you want to share anything as well about the ideation, or can I ask a question about? Now, I've mentioned that we obviously had to do this online, and we spent, you know, I don't even know how many months October to now is. Or is that 4 months, 5 months, 3 months, 2 months? I don't know.
Over 12 weeks. It's been a long time.
I mean, October to now, what's that, like 5 months or so? I don't know. The maths is not maths, isn't it? The maths is not maths. But what was the challenges? Like, what has been the challenging stuff about this project? You know, of trying to bring this sort of interactive artwork to life that explores Black British history and also the history of Somerset House? Like, what was the challenging things of this project?
I think it was probably like nailing down ideas, like nailing down and kind of like re-evolving ideas to kind of make it accessible and kind of make it logical. Because I remember like we started off with how many? I think it was like 16 different ideas to compact to 2 ideas to then kind of like merge the 2, but then it didn't work, so then we recreated it again. So I think it was kind of like the challenge was kind of like keep on recreating a way that this project can work, because when we thought it could work one way, it didn't work. So then we had to reevaluate how we could, how we can make it accessible to everyone. Yeah. So I think that was the challenge for me. But it was great. It was great to wreck my brain.
Yeah, it was interesting being facilitators because, we one of the key things we had to do in this project was to act as facilitators. So we couldn't be involved in the ideation process. So whatever conflict or war that you lot had to war it yourself in it. And we just had to facilitate that environment, because that's kind of the tension of where creativity happens, or that sort of innovation or whatever you want to call it happens, is in that sort of like tension points of, damn, we've got 2 ideas that have 2 different directions and we need to bring this together. And obviously one of the good things you lot realized was probably we have to like throw both ideas away, or we have to take the best elements of these ideas and somehow try to find that meeting point. So Janabi, what was challenging for you on this project as well? Was it similar to Ryan about the ideas or something else?
That, and also I remember another time I was in the studio with you, April and Kaylee, and for me, I found it really, I couldn't wrap around my head about does it actually need to link to Somerset House? Because some of the ideas we came up with, they were really good, but then I was really struggling to think, how does this link to Somerset House, and does it have to? And that's when Alex told me about the idea about, if you actually reflect on the history of Somerset House and how it used to be an archive, how can we use that again? And how can we actually use the space of Somerset House to make it a decentralized archive? So that's where the name comes from. So that, for me, it was a big challenge, just thinking about all the different ideas we had in our head, how to link it back to Somerset House, because again, Somerset House doesn't have any history of Black people within its within the tour or within any of the different things that we accessed. So for me, I found that hard. But then the whole idea about how can we reflect that, or how can we flip it so we use Somerset House as the new archive for Black history.
Wait, did I say that decentralized archive phrase?
Yeah.
Swear
it accessible. You did.
I didn't remember this. I just remember. I think there was a time. I think having this conversation with April, and I was like, maybe this lot are getting too stuck on trying to fit this idea into Somerset House. And I was like, maybe use this opportunity that Somerset House is the proxy, and it's like create a new historical archive that does have that decentralized viewpoint. Something that we could have this archive where people beyond us, 10 years from the line, 10 years down the line, can come back and see it, like a time capsule in a type of way, and that time capsule of history which people can come, but it has to live online in that way. So that's a really interesting point. Kaylee, what about you? What was like kind of any difficulties you had?
Obviously the main issue would probably be COVID. That just obviously makes everything difficult in terms of doing Zoom meetings. I'm trying to think. I think it's just a case of, especially creatives, I think we work better when we bounce off of each other's energy in person, and it allows us to bond better. So not being able to do that it was difficult, but we still managed to persevere regardless. And I'd say we're all quite close and good. So it's fine in the end, it's fine. But if there was in a parallel universe, I wish we did it in person.
But no, well done. I really love the fact that 6 of you did not know each other, but still, go for it, right?
Sorry to cut you. I was gonna say another challenge as well that I just came to my head was, I think it was like quite good for like April to like shout out to April. It was good to April to kind of keep reminding us that this is a project that's inspired by history, that is not about history. And I feel like at the start, we were just like, oh my God, yeah, this is about history. We're going to add all the facts. We want to get a historian in.
Yeah, so.
And then April was like, no. It's like inspired by history because it's a creative project. And I feel like once that was kind of cemented into our heads, I feel like that's when we started to like experiment with like how we can present history in a fun way, and a fun and exciting way, because we didn't want it to be boring. So
You guys can make it your own. Like, I think sometimes when you see all these names, it can be intimidating, right? Like, oh, what do they expect of me? But you step back, you saw Somerset House as what it represented as an archive, and then you use that as a tool for reflection to understand how you could do something for yourself. So,
for all those who are watching, there will be a sneak peek of this decentralized archive coming soon. But right now, we're just having this discussion. So for those who are watching and trying to understand where is this thing that they are talking about, it is coming soon. Let me see. Safi, did you have any sort of difficulties yourself in terms of like being a facilitator on a project like this?
So this was my first time really facilitating like with anyone, to be honest. And so I learned a lot about giving people space to like step into their superpower. That's something we did at the beginning of the project. And like you guys are really open with sharing what you are in the day, like your practice, but then also being like, okay, behind the scenes, I'm also really good at, bringing people together. I'm really good at listening to people and giving them space. So this project was like really explorative for me because I got to just kind of observe how you work together. And then me and Alex will talk about, okay, what teams can work together? Like, who's more visually focused? Who's more focused on researching and learning about the history? And so it was like a really big learning experience for me. But,
cool.
I learned a lot from it.
And now I'm going to ask a question for you three as well, because Safi mentioned about learning. So what have you lot learned from this project as well?
So anyone? Okay, I'll go first.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. Nah, I was staring at Ryan's screen, innit? And Ryan was in deep thoughts.
Because it makes it look like we haven't learned anything. So I was like, we have.
I was waiting for someone to
like, yeah. How would you teach it? Like, what advice would you give to other people?
What
I would say, okay, cool. I can answer both questions. So I've learned a lot. I've learned how to collaborate with people. I've learned how to bounce off each other's ideas. I've learned how to evolve ideas. I've learned how to like work with kind of like negotiate and stuff like that. I've learned to research and like use the research. Obviously I've researched before, but like I feel like using the research differently. Using the research to actually like, I think it's just like the little elements, using the little elements of the research to actually impact the project and stuff like that. And not being afraid to like, speak your ideas. Even though people might not agree with it, it's okay.
Similar to Ryan, I've definitely learned how to collaborate in an entirely digital project online. That's something I've never done before. And it's definitely taught me how to adapt better to any issues that happen, aka COVID. I also definitely learned about, well, I really not necessarily learned, but it's something I'd take in consideration is just in general the living deck, or the concept of having a living deck to sort of preserve every single aspect of this project, so that even if it felt like we felt lost along the way or there were bumps in the road, you always have that context to go back to and look at the start of the living deck and see the evolution of how we got to where we are. So that's definitely something I've learned, that in my next projects, I would probably do something very similar. But yeah.
Safi, do you want to explain what the living deck is?
Yeah, so the living deck is like, we use Google Slides, but it's just like this resource where you can import any kind of ideas you're having about the project. It basically, every time you have an idea about something or you want to build on a concept, you just put it in this file. And so it can get like really long, but it shows us like chronological story of the project. It's really good if people are jumping on projects like halfway. Like if someone new joined, you could be like, slide 66 has this and this and this. So you guys make good use of it. I was looking at it today.
Love to
Yeah,
know that.
I was proper impressed that everybody used it really well, because I was like, oh wow, people really believed in this, and it was proper nice to see the evolution of that. Yeah.
It's good one.
So many slides though. I've never had a slide that long before. Like how many slides? 100 and something slides.
I didn't
Like
even
Yeah, I have it here. Let me have a look.
that's like more than an hour long presentation.
Oh my god.
know.
We had so far we have 107 slides.
Oh, that's not that bad. That's not that
100
bad.
and, oh, okay, I thought you said that. Okay, yeah, it's not bad.
Cool. But Janavi, aka Lewisham's finest. I'm gonna use that in this case. Yeah, what did you learn?
I learned similar to Kaylee and Ryan, as we expected, the collaboration. So it really made me become a lot more empathetic. So putting myself in other people's shoes, because you can't just stick to your one-minded, like biased view of how you interpret things and how you think, because not everyone is in your mind, so they won't understand what you're trying to do or communicate. So I also learned how to better explain and articulate my ideas, so to make other people acknowledge or know what I'm trying to communicate. And also, yeah, I really learned how to, like Ryan was saying, it's okay to communicate your ideas, even if you think people will disagree. So yeah, that it really gave me some confidence. And also just working online with people digitally. So I learned a lot more about how to be online and how to actually create with people, but not in person. I'm going to ask a question. The question is, how were you able to input your own creative practices and methods into the project?
That's a really good question.
Perfect question.
I feel like with the research, I feel like that's kind of my thing. I love research. So that was kind of like, I think everyone can research, but I think it's the style of research that everyone has. That's what I've really noticed about this group. Everyone can research, but it's how they research. Everyone has their different styles, and I just love it. So I feel like that's that one that counts. And I feel like my approach in terms of expression and how I deal with people, I feel like that's another factor as well. I feel like even though that's not necessarily like that's not necessarily like an art form, but I feel like it's something that kind of adds on to like my artistic approach, if that makes sense, like how I deal with things. So that's another factor. And also I feel like my artistic approach as well, I feel like it was great to like be able to like illustrate things as well firsthand, especially the objects, and kind of make it my own style in relation to the project as well. I feel like that's a good answer for me right now. If I think of anything else, I'll let you know at the door.
Am I meant to answer as well, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So for me, contextually, I obviously graduated in illustration and graphics, so I would say that's my main forte. But for this project specifically, and in general, I've started looking more at having an interest in just like writing or copywriting. So that's one of the roles that I took on during this project. But with everything that went on, obviously, we had some adaptation, so it became a more illustrated and collage style thing. So obviously ended up being able to illustrate in the background as well. It's an illustration of mine. But yeah, that's basically it.
I guess I can answer the question.
Yeah.
For me, similar to Ryan, my research with me, I always try to find out the best methods for communicating. And I feel like sometimes I'd spend too much time researching, but I feel like for me, my mind, I can look at something and go deep in it. So I feel like for me, it was about creating different connections that other people might not have considered. So that was the way I was able to include from my creative practice.
I have a question for you guys off the top of my head. What were the challenges in, obviously we know this is for, because at the start it was very like, oh yeah, this is for Black people, underrepresented people. But then obviously we had to think about it being like accessible and applicable for everyone. So what were the challenges for you guys to kind of like unpeeling that, the shield of it being just only for Black people, if that makes sense, in terms of like the filter. I don't know if this question is making sense, so please let me know if it's not making sense.
It makes sense. I would probably say to that, in my personal opinion, Black British culture and history is integrally embedded in British history in general. So if you have an interest in British history, you should have an interest in Black history, because we've been here for time. We have made so many contributions to British society. So if you are interested in that, naturally you should be interested in what we have as well.
Yeah, I agree. In a way that sometimes Black British history is presented as alternative. I think it's important to reposition it as something that is collective. So it's part of the collective British culture. It's not separate.
Yeah, so I think obviously there were 6 individuals who were picked or who are part of the Young Producers Program, and a mixture of you have a mixture of skills. Some of you are artists, some of you are designers, and some of you are one studied history, one I think maybe both studied history. But there was quite this range of different skills, right? And for me, it was about, I need you lot to be unapologetically Black. I always made it clear that I don't want this project to be a tokenistic project in any way, shape, or form. So you lot need to unapologetically, like, basically tell the history in whatever way you want to do it. I think the key thing is obviously you're doing this through a digital experience. And so there are some sort of limitations to what you can do digitally. So I think for me, it was never about you diluting the story. I think it's just about the best way to tell the story through a digital means. So that was kind of me. So it was like, don't reduce, don't filter, but just remember, this has to exist on your phone. It has to exist on the web. It has to exist, so you're going to be, what you do, you're kind of limited by the medium that you're going to tell the story through. And I think that's kind of where I wanted to spend a lot of time. And that's why when Safi mentioned that example of telling the story of how somebody was going to interact with this, was because I was, for a period of time, trying to get you lot to go beyond yourself, to think about how somebody else would experience this. So, which is maybe quite different from, this artwork that you create. You put this in a physical installation, maybe someone's Somerset House, and that interaction that people have with it is completely different than how people have when it comes to a website through their computer or through their mobile phone. And so that's where a lot of my conversation was about, was just that interaction design. Cool. So everybody, thank you for locked in right now. We are now about to show a sneak peek of the Decentralized archive, or also known as Decentralized. I've been working with DXR Zone, so shout out to Riff and Seamus for supporting me on this project. And I'm going to show you a work in progress of, the Decentralized. So I'm going to share my screen and let's get ready. So I can now see my screen. So this is the Decentralized archive. And I'm going to, cool. So talk to me. Oh my days. Sorry. I don't know if anybody heard that. But talk to me about this. What do we have here? What is going on here? What is going on here? This is just, so talk to me about this. Who wants to go? For it?
So what we have here is essentially, decentralized, like I said before, the aim of the project is to create a decentralized, accessible space where people can find out different things about Black British history. And a lot of the stuff comes from different exhibitions that have been at Somerset House. So we want users to create their own narratives surrounding Black British history through creation, through interaction and play. So what we did was we have 4 different categories. They are political arts, Afro-nowism, Afrofuturism, and disobedient objects. So we have, you can see on the bottom left, the corner with the different boxes. So within each category, there are 4 objects that we all researched and we felt linked to each category. And within it, you can click on the object and you can find out more about it and what it is. I don't think that's been prototyped yet, but essentially you can create your own new art piece using the artifacts. And if anyone else wants to elaborate on that.
So I'm just like looking at this.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it's exciting. But, I would also add that each of the items we have are inspired or pay homage to exhibitions held by Black British artists at Somerset House. And for example, the boot that you see on the screen is direct reference to the No Tea, No Shade exhibition that was held. Another example would be the, I'm trying to think of another good one. They're all good, but you know what I mean. Does anyone else have another example that references an exhibition at Somerset House?
So that square on Afrofuturism, the one of like the science Afrofuturism, the green one, yeah, that one. So that one's basically based on an artist called Victor Epoch. He basically had he was part of the Get Up Stand Up Now exhibition back in 2019. And basically it was inspired by Shrine to Wisdom. So and the thing is we included like each object in the category because we thought we thought it related to, you know, the actual subject. So yeah.
So was there a goal as well? So the goal, right, is for people to come to the site, find out about the objects and why they've been selected as part of this, as the tools that they're going to use to create an artwork that would exist on that decentralized archive, right? So explain to me about what people do on this. Like why are we asking people to contribute to this decentralized archive?
We're basically inviting people to kind of like create their own version of. It's kind of like an open call to like artists or anyone, but it's kind of like the person is an artist to kind of create their own version of what Somerset House looks like. Because in the gallery, there's like different backgrounds of what there's basically different backgrounds of Somerset House basically, and some of it is art objects, some of it is art images, some of it is based off, you know, things around Somerset House. So the idea is basically just to invite people to kind of like create their own version of what Somerset House is to them and what it means to them. But by also learning about these objects that also have relation to Black history. Yeah.
And we also want to encourage people to examine the role that Somerset House serves as a modern British or multicultural institution. So although at present its history doesn't really acknowledge the existence or contributions of Black people, through its anti-racism pledge and 2020, it's kind of committed to changing that. So we just want to put people in the space so then how they can examine how can we use this also to reflect on the role of this kind of institution.
And I think also just looking at the traditional concept of an archive, a lot of them tend to be quite inaccessible. So in this sense, by creating it, we're sort of demystifying that and turning the archive into something that is not only accessible, but you can also play around with and become, in a weird way, you're a hybrid of an artist / archiver, because once it's saved, it naturally creates a legacy and it just preserves what you've created forever.
So how can people find out more about the Decentralized website? So it will be decentralized.somersethouse.org.uk, and even the URL is even part of the artwork. I kind of wanted the Decentralized to be in front of the Somerset House just to play around with that notion that we are sort of in a way decentralizing Somerset House. So yeah. Actually, now, what advice would you give to, you know, somebody watching this who is saying, you know, I actually want to be able to be inspired by history and tell my own and tell a story, and maybe is that a good question? Or tell a story about history or Black history in that case. What would be your advice for them?
What would be our advice to people who want to tell Black history?
Yeah, or stories, or stuff like this, like things that you see in like artworks. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Get your facts straight. I'm joking. What would I say? Definitely
Ryan's
be
lost for words.
Pardon?
I
I
would.
said
Well,
you're lost for words.
can I give an example? I would say that when it comes to like archiving just ourselves, I would say every single day is a story. So even the little things like what we eat, when we hang out, where we hang out with our friends, what our auntie made at the cookout, even the tiniest details encompass our history, and it might not seem relevant now, but in 50 years from now, it will be treasured because it's something that you can look on, and we have a legacy in that sense. So the little details of being Black are what I think are worth archiving, essentially.
I would say don't filter it. That's what I would say. I say don't filter it. I feel like there's been so many years, like especially about people like fashion and stuff like that. Like there's been so many years of filtering out like stories and stuff like that, and not telling the actual truth. I think just make it non-filter. Say every little detail, like similar to what Kaylee said. Like every little bit detail, like just say the truth, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Don't be afraid. Be unapologetic and speak your truth. And also acknowledge that you, as a Black person, you are part of this history too. So also acknowledge that and tap into it, that you are worthy.
Yeah, as always, I'm just going to say I'm proud of you guys. And you really shown what it means to just like, echoing what Kaylee said, really. Sometimes archives are just seen as written. Like I think of people in these corridors with all these boxes of portfolios of stuff, and you've like really shown us how our stories are kept in our objects and our experiences, and there's conversations we have with our grandparents, and there's different ways of collecting and like holding them close to us. So yeah, thanks so much for embodying it in the project and working with us to get to that space.
Thank you.
Exactly. I was gonna say, like, don't give the praise to us. Like, thank you guys. Like, you guys are you're the ones who've facilitated it. Like, you're the ones who provided us with the guidance and stuff like that. So, like, that's forbidden knowledge there. So, like, thank you guys as well. I was gonna ask. I don't know if we asked you this question, but what did you guys learn? Like, what did both of you learn on this project?
Cool. I feel like I learned. I think I learned the beauty of seeing people sort of be passionate about something and tell a story about their piece of work. I think the beauty of working on a project like this was that it was kind of maybe, away from the walls of capitalism and having to create things that contribute to this capitalistic nature of life, and just creating something which can truly tell a story. I think I kind of enjoyed the moments I got to spend with you. And obviously, like I said, it's kind of been a thing that hurts me the most about this project, was never getting to spend more time in person, just having those times of conversation, that little moment of spending with Janavi, of saying those comments of Janavi having his things. And I was like, bro, don't, but those are the things you miss. Sometimes not, you don't get that in Zoom. That was just like a passing conversation. I just came to Somerset House that day. I just happened to see Janavi and Kaylee chilling. And I said, hey, let me chew you up for like 20 minutes and I have to go to a meeting, and had that conversation. Those are the things that I miss. But I've learned a lot of stuff, and I'm already dreaming about how we can present this to the world. And, and I'm just going to say thank you to Somerset House for giving us the opportunity to be able to put on this project in this way. Thank you to Eleanor. Thank you to April. Thank you to Dictionary. Thank you to the Art Funds for funding this project. Thank you for Pinterest also for their support as well on this project. Thank you to Kaylee, Janavi, Ryan, Zach, Nkechi, Okocha, Safi, Richard. I can't remember who else to thank. Maybe
Kill.
other people. Kill. Okay, Kill. Thank you so much. Everyone as well for watching this, for engaging in this conversation. Please do use the Decentralize project artwork, and please do create art, submit art, let it exist in this decentralized archive. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Points.